Welcome back to the show. I'm so excited to chat with my guest. So, Annemarie, I'd love to have you start off by telling us who you are and what you do in the events industry.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me. My name is Annemarie Allain. I am a freelance contractor. So I do quite a few little things in the event world. I started in trade show and event operations. And then post COVID, I transitioned into event marketing and messaging. A lot of companies will call me when they're trying to talk to exhibitors and sponsors and their attendee base to differentiate the messaging, kind of freshen it up from a copy standpoint. But I also have the opportunity to work on the logistics and operations side of many events too. So kind of jack of all trades when it comes to trade shows and events.
Yeah, and I think communications and events has changed so much. Like before we hopped on, as we were getting connected, we were talking about, we're 6 years into most people working remotely. Like obviously some people were doing that before, and now some people are back in offices, but like we're still all over the place. And like we're 6 years out now, almost exactly for some places from lockdowns. And the communication has changed so much because in 2019, 2018, if you had a recurring event, you just re-emailed your list and you're like, hey, we're doing it again. Come on down. We'll see you again. Same with your sponsors, your exhibitors. You'd say, hey, remember that thing you sponsored last year? Please send us your check for $5,000. We're ready to do it again, right?
Yeah.
And just there's so much has changed that one, there's so much more competition among events. And I know like we've had conversations about the association model versus groups that are not technically associations but are kind of
Mhm.
like starting to mimic what associations are doing. And so I would love to hear, we're kind of a couple months into the year. What are you seeing the trends in communications going? Because I know what I'm seeing, but like you're really
Yeah,
in it. So I'm curious what you see.
absolutely. I think, the event space has always run a little bit behind the consumer space as far as messaging and kind of catching on to what are getting consumers. People are a lot more, they're actively monitoring where they're going, what they want to do, and how they want to spend their time. And so just emailing your list and saying, hey, we're doing it again, and we have 75 sessions and we have coffee all day isn't going to do it. They want to understand how this benefits them, what they're going to bring home. And if you think about it, that's what consumer brands have been doing for decades, right? You see all those commercials during the Super Bowl or what we're seeing during the Olympics, and they're hitting feelings or how they're making life easier or work easier. And events just hasn't tapped into that as well as consumer brands have. So I have seen a number of people or a number of groups starting to trend that way, understanding that people are being selective. They can go to online events, they can go to events closer to home. Maybe they don't like the destination and you've got to figure out how to woo them to somewhere that they don't want to go. So I think it's slowly taking hold, but people are starting, or folks are starting to understand that we've got to play to those emotions and what we're doing for them and not rely on we have 75 sessions and coffee. So,
Yeah. And you made a great point too around like the availability of content online, right? Whether it's
so
a formal virtual event or it's, just watching someone's webinar, watching someone's like content on social media, right? Like I joke all the time that like if your event is just based on content, it could have been a video, right? Like, well, why do I need to
absolutely.
fly somewhere to go sit in a room to watch something
Well,
that is just
that's
recorded?
kind of
Like,
the rise of the whole unconference idea,
yeah.
right? Is you get to go and you're still consuming that content, but then you're talking to somebody who sits in your same seat at a whole different company in a different industry, and maybe that brings up something more than what one speaker at the front of the room can. So I think the rise of the unconference and the concept of that is indicative of what you're saying, is that we've got to create more ways for people to talk to each other. And we have to do a better job from the onset, from the first marketing stages, your landing pages and your website, your email, your social media, all of that stuff has to have, or even just your letter, letter to your boss, justification for attending. That stuff has to start, those conversations have to start early. Here's how we're benefiting you, and here's what you're going to get at the conference. So yeah, I think the way people consume content is so dramatically different than it was 6 years ago.
Oh, and that is a huge thing. Like when I talk to clients about, well, we want to do like a 90-minute session. I'm like, for who?
Oh,
Like for what? Like 90 minutes? Are you crazy? Like even
90 minutes if you're
45 minutes.
I mean, I would say 90 minutes if you've got maybe a short presentation from one facilitator at the beginning, and then you're breaking people into groups and like speed dating them, right?
Yeah,
I
like
think you can get away with a longer session in that format, but your traditional slide deck speaker at the front of the room, yeah, I mean, 45 is kind of probably pushing it these days.
and 45 is starting to push it, right?
For sure.
If you had told me 10 years ago that we wouldn't be doing hour-long sessions, I'd be like, well, what, like, how, you're not going to be able to do it in 45 minutes or 30 minutes. But now it's like shorter, 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 right? Like more
Well,
content, more
attention spans are
breaks.
different,
Attention spans are different.
especially the younger generations that are starting to come in, their attention spans are so much different. And there's only so much they're willing to sit through, to be honest. So,
Well, and I think about it too when we talk about like school, like oh, kids can't sit still, can't. I'm like, I don't remember kids ever sitting still. Like, I think we just forced them. Like, we just didn't appreciate different learning styles. We were just like, this is the model, this is what you have to do, right? So, yes, our attention spans
absolutely.
have changed, but like, were 60-minute sessions ever serving us, or do we just that's what we defaulted to, and then people just sat there distract like before phones obviously they wouldn't have had as many distractions, but you
Staring into
start
space,
talking
they're
that long.
writing a
Yeah,
to-do
like
list or grocery shopping.
yeah,
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you. I think it's questionable whether 60-minute sessions were ever effective, but I think the event space as a whole is dependent on how we've always done it. And
yeah.
I know personally with COVID, I had hoped, I think there was an article, and you'll have to forgive me, I can't remember exactly, but the article itself made this impact. How is COVID the events industry's Napster moment, where it's like the, ah, we've
Mhm.
done it wrong type thing. And Napster, didn't seize that moment. And so now we've got Spotify and Apple Music and all these things and Napster wayside, right? I don't think we hit our Napster moment, right? Like we haven't gone to the wayside, but we didn't necessarily learn lessons. And I think that happens a lot in associations. I know we've talked about that off the show, but I think associations default to this is how we've done it. We have this core group who comes, and they just haven't gotten they haven't gotten the message. They don't take that next step. Whereas a tech or a pharma event who are looking at innovation and forward thinking are more apt to want to try something different. So I think it's a matter of us finding that moment. And I had really hoped that the events would turn a corner, and not just, conferences, but trade shows and things like and corporate retreats. I had hoped they would turn a bit of a corner. And I think we like leaned left, but we didn't go around the corner. And really like embrace and meet people where they're at.
Yeah, and I think it's so true. There are some industries, like you said, that are more willing to take that leap. And even like I've had like conversations with tech clients that are like, "Oh, you can't even say the word conference around here." I'm like, "Okay, I get it." Like we're still doing a conference. We're just
Yeah.
not calling
I'm
it that.
working
That's
with
okay.
a group right now that they've got the name of their event, but they are calling it an unconference, and we're developing messaging together about how to introduce that concept to their
Yeah.
attendees and to their group. And so it takes some education, because in the event space, the professionals are like, "Oh yeah, unconference, we get it." But, a computer programmer or an accountant who isn't living and breathing this space all of the time, maybe like, what is an unconference? So we're developing some messaging to kind of explain that to their audience, because it is a more tech finance audience. But I do think you're going to see the rise of that. And I think associations really need to jump on board with that. And I haven't seen a lot of them doing anything like that. They talk about all their
Yeah.
networking, but it's not in the sense that it needs to be.
Yeah, and it's very much like that fear of like holding on, like if we change it so much, like people aren't going to come. Like if we call it something completely different or tell them it's going
Right.
to be completely different, then they're not going to want to come. And I posted about this recently on social media that sometimes event planners or organizers or other stakeholders get, pigeonholed and get worried too much about, like, well, this industry would never go for that. Like, oh, the legal industry would never want to do something outside the box,
Right.
or like, accountants would never want to do something outside the box, or like insert whatever like traditionally conservative professional like group you're talking about. But then when you actually let them do it, they're the ones that have the most fun because they're like, oh my God, this is so great. Like,
Well, I
it's,
mean, some of those industries are so buttoned up in the workplace
yeah,
that these conferences, and I think, there's always been that long-standing joke that the lawyers cut loose, right? They get there and they're like, I'm
yeah,
free, and they cut loose or whatever it is. And I don't think that's just kind of in the evening parties that they want. They,
no,
some of these kind of more traditional buttoned up industries, I think they're looking for that engagement in all areas of it. I mean, as far as communicating with those people, though, I think part of it is it's just a matter of setting the stage or drawing the picture or painting the picture, whatever you want to say beforehand, right? To get them there. You need to explain what's going to happen and how this is different. It just doesn't, especially industry associations and conferences. They rely on the tried and true, but we're in a major shift of generations leaving the workplace and coming in, and
mm,
associations have traditionally relied on those members or companies buying memberships for their employees. But there's this entire rise of contractors and solopreneurs in the world. I know, especially in the event space, we've seen this, right? People who have decided, I mean, that's what I've decided to do. So you have this whole rise, but then I go to register for some of these event industry conferences and it's astronomical how much they want, or you have to be a member of the association. But I'm a party of one. So, a $5,000 membership for a single year just so I can buy another $2,000 ticket to their event isn't feasible. So I
yeah,
think, especially in our industry, I think it hits associations. I've worked for a number of associations. I think across the board, that's how associations are. But I definitely think the event industry has not led the way when it comes to the value of what those associations bring, because they do bring value, but they're not talking to the new way of working or the new generation coming in. I mean, I'm not the new generation coming in by any means, but I have chosen a new way of working. Like, 25 years later, I've chosen a new way to be part of the industry. And so I don't think some of our associations are keeping up with that new way. They're relying on that same old membership model and some of those same events. And I think these younger people are just like, why do I need that? I can find online forums. I can go to Reddit and ask the questions. I mean, Substack has tons of information. So what value does, and I do think the associations bring value no matter what industry you're in. I do think there is value, but they're not selling it well, and they
right,
certainly haven't modified their membership structure to meet people where they're at either. They're
yeah, yeah. And if you're not meeting your members where you're at, where your attendees where they're at, you're gonna lose out to the competition, right? Like I think that yes, it's hard to start a new event, but there are new events coming into the fold. Like I know in the events world, like in Canada, there's newer events that kind of keep popping up every year, and I'm like, another one, right? And like, again, even as a solopreneur or when I was working in house, it's like, okay, well, even if I'm asking my company for money, I still have to get value out of it. I still have to sell the reason why it's worth me being away from my desk for 2, 3, 4 days, whatever
at a flight
the
and a hotel.
timeline is.
I mean, the
Yeah,
traditional justification letters, right? That so
yeah,
many events post and say, here's your letter justifying it. But those letters still aren't saying what that person's going to bring back. If your company or as a solopreneur, you're going to invest 5K or whatever it's going to be to go to an event, I want to know, what am I bringing back? that is going to apply now? Like, and is this a conversation that we've had? I mean, every conference you go to, I don't even care what industry you're in, has how many sessions on AI?
Yeah.
Like, is it a new AI something, or is it the same AI that I've heard through 10,000 webinars and 3 other conferences? So I think just what the unique identifiers, right? Like
Yeah.
that has to be what's in your justification letter for your company, or even just for yourself. Like,
Right.
you know, um, and we just have, like I said, historically, this industry has done a really bad job of that. I think a lot of people think the more sessions you have, or the more, or if you have a really strong hosted buyer program, not that that isn't great. I do love a hosted buyer program, but you know, touting the number of sessions you have, or I've got 500 exhibitors, fantastic. But how many of those exhibitors actually speak to what that person's doing? And I think so many associations are, or not, I shouldn't say associations, I should say organizations, aren't segmenting their data enough on the front end to talk to people. They're just doing a catch all. And I get it. It's a lot of work to segment your audience and have multiple versions of your communications. But in doing so, you get to talk to those people. You get to talk, if you're a medical association, you get to talk right to cardiologists, right to
Yeah.
ophthalmologists, right to neurosurgeons, right? And so you have a better shot of talking to them. Hey, we have 75 exhibitors that specialize in cardiology equipment, and we've got 17 sessions that will help you learn these 5 things. And, you know, especially mid-size and small organizations, they may be running off 1 or 2 marketing people. And so in segmenting the data and coming up with versions doesn't feel manageable. And I think that's where the value of a contractor comes in. It seems like a really expensive investment until you realize I'm not paying them, I'm not paying their 401k, and I'm not sending them to the
Yeah.
dentist. And then suddenly it's like, that seems like a reasonable investment to get what I need. But I do think, going back to it, the segmentation and being able to talk to your audience where they're at. I mean, I know we've said that. I feel like I've like kicked that can a million times that we, you know, but it's true. You've got to, there's a new way. It can't just be, I have a list of 5,000 people and I'm going to send a generic message. You
Yeah.
got to
And I think
figure out.
that's where you're like, yeah, for sure. And I think that's where your relationship with marketing operations comes into play, right? And having them really on board of why you need great segmented data. And now, like, if you're in a really small organization, maybe you don't have a marketing ops, but I've often been a solo planner on a team or like in a company where I'm just the one event planner, but there is a marketing operations because we're doing digital, we're doing like,
Right.
you know, digital direct mail. The other traditional forms are now traditional forms of marketing. And like, I am saying, but I want my list segmented by state. Like, I don't want to invite people, and I even in a dream world, like I'd want it by city, you know, like I'm in Ontario. Ontario, if I drive north for 15 hours, I'm still in the province, right? So sending it to the state or province is better than sending it to the whole country. But can I get even better and say, well, let's try people within 300 kilometers or something like that, you know, and getting really granular. Like, I know when I get an invite and it's like, oh, great, it's 4.5 hours away from me, like for a lunchtime event. Like, okay, like that doesn't make sense, right? So I think
Yeah.
working with your marketing ops to get like really great data or really great like segmentation will just help everybody, make everybody better.
Rude. And I think, you know, you can only invite people who are 4.5 hours away for a lunch so many times before they opt out, right?
Yeah.
They're going to hit your unsubscribe button because they keep getting invited to things. There's a large association that I used to be a member of, and they have a Southwest chapter, but it encompasses, and I live in Southern California. It encompasses Southern California, all of Nevada, part of Arizona, and they'd have all these events like in Vegas. Sweet, but I'm not coming over there, to your point, for lunch. You know, I'm not going to Phoenix for a lunch. And so they just blanket throw it out to everybody. And I kind of stopped just paying attention. And so I think that happens to a lot of people, or they hit
Yeah.
unsubscribe and then suddenly whether you're using HubSpot or Salesforce or whatever, Klaviyo, to send out your marketing, your unsubscribe rates are going up, and that hurts your health score. So it's, I think that the idea of segmentation, if you don't have a marketing ops person, sourcing one who can help you look at your audiences, but from the very beginning, and I think it always goes back to basics too, is why are we having this event? And understanding the messaging platform for your event, right? And so I have written for a number of companies just to sit and say, what is the purpose of this? Like, why are we coming together? And that messaging platform, those planks, then drive the rest of the communications, because we know solidly what we're trying to do and where we're going with it. And from there, we can take that messaging and segment it to different audiences. And sometimes the emails are as easy as you have one email and there's 4 places that you just swap out some information, or it's the same email, but you change out the bullet. So it isn't always a heavy lift. You're not recreating the wheel per version. But, I think even if you have to outsource or find a fractional marketing ops person who can help segment the data, work with somebody to write you different versions, I think the return on investment is going to be, at least in the groups I've seen who took the time to do that. And I don't have any specific numbers because sometimes as a contractor, they're not like, here's our numbers. But the return on investment for people the groups I've seen have been great, especially because they're getting net new attendees, right? It's not just repeat, they're attracting new people, which really is what every event needs and wants to continue, are new people. And you still want your repeats, but at some point you got to have the folks are retiring and new ones need to come, right? So it seems basic and it seems overwhelming for small groups, but I think it's critical to marketing these days, and especially in events.
Yeah, I think people are expecting more and more to be marketed at in a very personalized way, right? Like no longer are like very generic emails working, right? It's using the data that you have about your attendees. It's even using event data. Like, what did people love about last year's event? Oh, well, you all loved whatever it was, and so we're bringing that back, or we're adding more of those sessions. Maybe it was, more workshop
answered type thing. Well, it's event surveys. I think people, a lot of times you ask the wrong questions. Like, if you're not planning to do anything with the answer, don't ask the question.
Yeah.
But if you truly are like, hey, if you could pick from these 4 engagement activities, rank them or whatever, if you ask the right questions, it's incredibly valuable. But I don't need, like, if you're not planning to change your F&B budget to increase and serve, lobster, don't ask if they like the chicken or they want something different, right? I think a lot of time, I've worked with some groups on surveys, and especially when I worked in-house with multiple events, I ran multiple events, and the question, we were asking all kinds of random questions. And I finally was like, what are we doing with this? Why are we even asking this? And I think we cut our survey in half after the event, and the data became more useful, right? It's not like the lanyard was too loud or the air conditioning was cold. I mean, it was
the loud lanyards.
And I'll tell you what, we did a show in Amsterdam, and that is all people could talk about was those lanyards. But it was, I think asking the right questions help too. And part of that is in your event registration form. And I am on the school of thought that the event registration form should not take you 15 years to fill out, right? It needs to be quick and efficient. But I think there are some very key questions that you can ask there, right, to understand who your markets are. So then suddenly you have your registration numbers coming in, and you've got 30% of those people are cardiologists. So then I'm going to go back to my segmented data and send an email to cardiologists and say 500 of your colleagues are already attending. Is your name on that list, right? And so, but to your earlier point, it takes some digging in there. And if you're a marketing team of 1 or 2, you don't.
Well, it takes even I think it's not even so much about the number of people. It's investing the time as well, right? Because your person or couple people on a small marketing team can do that work, but you have to also not be expecting them to get 17 invites out this week and the venue contract isn't even signed yet. Like, you need to give them room to breathe to do that work. Like, whether you bring in a contractor or whether it's being done in house, it's very much like, are you giving your team, however they're doing it, the time it takes to do those things, or are you just rushing to the next invite, rushing? Oh, we haven't reached our goal. Start sending out invites. Start posting on social media, like without
We
like an
have this
actual plan.
content calendar, and we've got to get this many things out, and we've got
Yeah,
to get this, and it's like, okay, you can send out however many emails you want. You can post on social every day. But if the messaging isn't hitting the targets, your content calendar is useless. So is it better to send one targeted email a week to the right audiences with the right message? Or do you want to send 3 a week and flood their email? I mean,
yeah,
personally, I've always chosen to make it direct to that person, speaking to them. And if there's one, if it's one a week, but it's targeted and concentrated, then I think to me, that's a better use of your time and efforts than. So I don't know. I
absolutely.
mean, I you know, I think so many brands are trying, it's like my husband was shopping for a new pillow. I don't know what it is. My husband and pillows. He can't find the right one. And so he looked up one pillow, and his feed on on Instagram is covered in pillow
Yeah,
ads, right? So there's cookies and they're targeting you and there's tracking everywhere. And it's like, you can figure out who your audience is, right?
yeah,
And put keywords, and there's all kinds of programs that, if somebody's searching for a keyword and it hits a keyword that the ad pops up, or suddenly you're in their algorithm. And if you're not using that to your advantage, then you're probably missing out on attendees who don't even know your event exists.
yeah, for
And
sure.
that's there's just so many ways to do it now. And I think as an industry, events, we got to get our act together and start using all of those.
Yeah, for sure. Amazing. Perfect place to wrap it up. Like, I think there's so much opportunity. Like you said, it's overwhelming, but it also can be really exciting if we're open and willing to put the investment in resources and time and all of that
Absolutely.
to do it. So, would love to have you tell us where people can find out more about the work you're doing and how to connect with you online.
Yeah, absolutely. If you're interested in seeing all the things and services that I offer and samples of my copywriting work, you can visit a2communications.com. There's a form on there that you can contact me if you're interested in talking about your messaging or your platforms or how to segment your data. I'd love to help you with any of that.
Amazing. Thanks so much for being here.
Yeah, thanks so much. It was a great time.